Tomato Island. Yep, I just gave Boo a little haircut on his face. Today I'm going to read you a story about Yellow Island. Can you see Yellow Island? It's really hard to see. So you see the big island, San Juan. You see Shaw Island and you see Orcas Island. I'm going to stick my finger up here. Little Yellow Island is the last 11-acre island that's part of the Wasp Island group. When you come up to my house, you can see this map on the wall. So, boys and girls, I'm going to turn this around so you can see me, maybe not. This is the book I'm going to read to you, 7 Summer Days. And it was written by my mother, your great-grandmother, Sally Dodd Hall. There's Grandpa. Can you say hi?
Hello.
Yeah, he's been outside working. And this is the story I'm going to read to you. Great-grandma Sally wrote this book in 1978. And this was the year that they were working with the Nature Conservancy to sell the island to them. And they knew that that would be the end of us being able to spend the overnight on Yellow. And so they made a space for their grandkids to come up. And the grandkids came up for 2 weeks that summer. There was two separate. There was the Tim Hall family came 1 week, and then the Jeff Hall family came the next week. So the illustrations are by Sally, great-grandma. She was good, wasn't she? So I don't know if you can see this, but here's a big cabin. That's where great-grandma, your great-great-grandma Tibby Dodd lived. And this is the little tiny house that great-great-grandpa Dodd built for the Hall family children. And this is the boathouse, the well. There was a ship ladder that was up in that tree that you could climb and you could see for miles. And then there is the East Spit. And this was my mother's rendition of Chibuka. Oops. So, 7 Summer Days, a story for reading aloud. 7 Summer Days was written or dedicated to her grandchildren, Dana, Michael, David, Kirsten, Scott, Joshua, and Leah. But they had a few more grandchildren than that. But this is all the grandchildren that were alive at that time. Here is a picture of Chibuka. She was a 32-foot camper Nicholson with a diesel engine. And this is the dry grasses on Yellow. 7 Summer Days. It was a hot summer day on Yellow Island when the Hall's 4 grandchildren came to visit for a whole week. Dana was 8 years old and her brother Michael was 6. Their cousins Scott and Joshua were 6 and 3. They sailed to Yellow Island with their grandparents on their boat Chibuka, and they helped steer toward the moorage buoy near Yellow Island's South Beach. There, Grandpa Hall secured the boat lines and Grandma Hall helped the children into the dinghy for the trip to the beach. The children had heard their fathers tell their memories of summer visits to Yellow Island in their childhood. They talked about the driftwood piles on the beaches, the clear, cold, salt water, the gulls and the ducks and the rockfish, the starfish, clams, seals, whales, and crabs. And the thread of exciting adventure and love for Yellow Island ran through all the stories. This is a picture of the big cabin when Grandma Dodd had her garden out by the back door. This is Grandma Dodd coming up the ramp. That's Scott. This is Dana and Grandma Dodd on the beach. Yellow Island got its name because it had just enough room on it for some large madrona trees, a number of tall firs, several big willows, 1 small oak, lots of summer yellow grasses, and brilliant flowers on its 2 little hills and the banks above the beaches. Yellow Island had a long, sturdy ship's ladder, which their great-grandfather Lou Dodd had hung from one of the tallest fir trees good for climbing and looking out at boats and birds on the water around the island. Yellow Island also had 2 small cabins, a workshop, a boathouse, a pigeon house, and a well, all built years ago by their great-grandfather. Now, their great-grandmother, Tibby Dodd, lived in the large cabin alone during the warm summer days, tending her little vegetable garden. The Hall children were coming to stay in the smaller cabin at the other end of Yellow Island, where they would bring their bags and suitcases for the week's visit. Dana and Michael brought clothes, books, and games in their own duffel bags their mother had made. Each bag had a pocket for a toothbrush and hairbrush. Scott and Joshua brought one big suitcase their mother had packed with lots of old comfortable things to wear. All 4 brought their own warm sleeping bags. This is Scott and Joshua. Gavin, do you remember baking bread with Joshua down in Oregon? That's when he was 3 years old. And this is out on the beach. Dana and Michael said they wanted to sleep inside the cabin on the floor near their grandparents' bed. Scott and Joshua decided they wanted to sleep in 2 bunks under the cabin's sloping shed roof just outside the door. But Scott said he really would rather sleep in his grandparents' big bed. He said it looks more cozy than all the children talked about what each wanted to do. Dana said she wanted to have campfires for toasting marshmallows on the beach near the cabin. Grandma Hall said, Dana, do you see how dry the grasses are on the banks near the beach? She said, do you know what would happen if one spark should blow into that grass? Grandma said, that grass would explode and burn all the rest of Yellow Island. Dana looked disappointed. She said, then how can we toast marshmallows? Grandma Hall said, did you know that marshmallows can give children sugar fits, Dana? Grandma Hall hugged Dana and said that she knew that toasting marshmallows is fun, but there would be lots of other good things to cook, like pancakes on the little square griddle on top of a hot little black stove in the cabin. Grandpa Hall sighed and said, Grandma's a nut, but I love her anyway. All the children wanted to hear Grandpa's stories and to listen to their grandma read chapters from The Secret Garden and from Summerfolk with their wonderful drawings. They read Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little. Charlotte's Web and Stuart's Little allowed at rest times too. Scott said he wished he could watch TV, but Yellow Island had none. Each morning, all the children and their grandparents wakened when the sun began to set the Madonna trees glowing orange red, and the bright green and the dew on the yellow grasses began to dry. But they used the outdoor toilet with its view of the other islands and the blue water all around. They washed their hands in a big basin of water. They washed their hands in the big basin full of cold well water on the bench outside the cabin door. Joshua used lots of soap to make bubbles until the good smells of breakfast brought him inside with the others. Grandma had already mixed the pancake batter with Dana and Michael, helping to stir in the buttermilk, the oatmeal, the honey, whole wheat flour, eggs, and butter. Michael liked to crack the eggs. No one minded if a little spilled. Dana and Michael took turns spooning batter onto the hot griddle, but Scott said he would rather watch. Joshua wanted to spoon the batter too, so Grandma helped him because she knew how hard it is to stand close to a hot stove for a person who is short and only 3. Grandma said, it's great to have enough helpers so I can eat too. After Scott watched his cousins turning their pancakes, he decided to try. It made him feel good to learn that he could. It's a picture of Scott and Joshua on West Beach, the West Bit, jumping logs and looking at tide pools, playing with rafts. Those rocks get nice and warm in the summertime. It feels good to lie down on the rocks. There's Dana jumping off the that was a beachcomb boat, I bet. Dana and Michael Each ate 9 pancakes with butter and honey and syrup. Scott ate 3. He said, "My mother doesn't make pancakes like these," he said. "This syrup doesn't taste like real syrup." Dana then brought out vitamin pills her mother had sent with her and Michael for once each day. Michael liked these very much as they tasted sweet and chewy. He thought there seemed to be enough of them to have some at every meal. His sister Dana disagreed, and there was a lot of discussion. Finally, Grandma said, "All right, Michael, let's count enough out for each day of the rest of your visit for each person." After breakfast, they did this and found that Dana was right. Scott said, "I don't like pills." After breakfast, all went out to play on the beach with Grandpa Hall, except for Joshua, who liked to wash dishes while Grandma Hall dried and put them away. Still in his pajamas, a very wet-stomached Joshua let his grandma undress him for a warm sponge bath in the big basin near the stove. Dried and dressed, Joshua helped make peanut butter cookies with sunflower seeds in them as a surprise treat for the rest of the family. He worked hard to mix the stiff dough, and he tasted it frequently. Everyone thought the cookies were good except for Scott. He said, "I don't like this kind of cookie." Each day, the children discovered new things to do on Yellow Island. Grandpa Hall helped them build a log raft big enough for 2 children to paddle. At first, the water looked too deep to try the raft or the little orange boat their grandfather had beachcombed, but each day they went a little further until the long rope tied to both crafts pulled tight. Wakes from the large boats passing in the outer channel made the boats rock back and forth and splash, but the children learned to enjoy this too. Dana even jumped off the end of the little orange boat into cold water deep enough to reach her chin. Dana, Michael, Scott, and Joshua especially liked to explore the tide pools on the rocks of the reef at low tide. They discovered little hermit crabs bumping along in their burrowed shells in the shallow water. There were tiny fish, cone-shaped limpets, and red anemones, and even some chitons with their segmented backs. They found lots of purple and yellow-orange starfish clinging to rocky crevices near the tide pools. On the days when the tide was very low, the children could see red and purple sea urchins looking like spiny cushions on submerged rocks. One day, the children helped their grandfather dig for enough clams for chowder. Grandpa Hall explained that they needed to refill the holes they had dug in order to keep the clams left behind space to feed and breathe. He said, "If we are careful now, there will be clams for us to enjoy every year." Several times the children watched a mother harbor seal and her pup sleeping on the outer reef offshore. Once some killer whales snorted and rolled their way up channel. On that day, the seals disappeared. On another day, a piked whale spouted near Yellow Island. Great-grandmother Tibby Dodd said she thought it might be the same whale that visited every summer. She said, "We named him Goodyear because his black, shiny skin looks like a wet inner tube." Early one morning, Grandma Hall watched an otter swimming near the rocks where she stood. She came back to the cabin to draw a picture of what she had seen to show the children as they snuggled with Grandpa Hall in the big bed before breakfast. After naps later in the day, all 4 children wanted to walk up the little hill to help pull water out of the deep well in the center of Yellow Island. It was hard work to pull the rope through the pulley wheel and to bring up each full bucket. They learned how to coil the well rope neatly and to hang it with the black well bucket inside its little box with the roof on it. There was rain on only one of the days the children stayed on Yellow Island. It was a real storm with dark clouds, lightning, and thunder. The children sat near the windows with their grandparents. These are pictures of the well. Grandpa, Scott, and Joshua. That well goes down like 160 feet. It's really long. And the bucket was formed out of, chimney pipe. I said that was a question because I'm wondering if that's the right name for pipes that go in. Stovepipe maybe is a better word. Michael and Dana in the reef. Here's the big cabin. They watched the lightning make zigzag patterns against the darkened islands across the channel. Soon the rain followed, giving the sun-dried island a much-needed wetting. Even the usually noisy crows in the tallest fir trees seemed to be quiet and grateful. All through that day, the children's prayers at meals and bedtimes were full of wonder and thankfulness for the Lord's work in their world. Michael looked up from the driftwood house he was building one morning on the beach to see a person in a small boat coming into the beach. He shouted, "Grandma, Aunt Emmy Lou is here!" Everyone ran to help bring in the boat, and after hugs all around, great Aunt Emmy Lou lifted out a surprise picnic lunch. Everyone walked to great-grandmother Tibby's big cabin to sit in the shade of the big madrona tree outside. It was a hot day, and it was pleasant having hard-boiled eggs and cheese and peanut butter and honey sandwiches and fizzy apple juice from a big cooler Aunt Emmy Lou had brought. Joshua had such a good time he didn't want to leave for his nap, but he was so tired he cried all the way around the trail, "Me don't want to rest." After a little time in the big rocking chair in Grandma's lap, Joshua was ready for a short story and a long nap. Each day, Scott, Michael, and Dana rested for an hour after lunch. Michael always fell asleep, but Dana and Scott never did. Instead, they chose to read books quietly in the corners of the cabin. They chose books to read quietly in the corners of the cabin they wanted for their quiet times. When it was time to leave Yellow Island, all the children were happy to think about home again, especially Scott, who said, "Now I can watch my favorite TV." Joshua felt happy just to have another ride on Chabuca. It was a windy day. It was windy enough for the boat to heel a little. The trip to the ferry landing in Friday Harbor was a short one. The long, sunny week on Yellow Island was over. There was much for the children to think about. Dana said, "Grandma and Grandpa, I hope we can come again next year for 7 summer days."